All right, let's go ahead and get started today. We are focusing for this week on some of the backgrounds to Christianity and thinking about what is the context of the world that Christianity is developing into. And then next week we'll move on into the origins of Christianity and from there on. And essentially there are kind of three sections that we'll be looking at in this context. We'll be looking at some things related to Greece, Rome, and some things related to Judaism. And all of those kind of setting the stage, some very important developments for this period of time that we're looking at. Some of which will take us back a couple hundred years before Christianity. And in many respects, that means starting as far back as the 300s before Christ. And much like we'll do throughout the rest of the semester, I'm going to break this section up into thinking about some political developments that are going on, some cultural and societal developments going on, and then looking at some other aspects of that on Thursday, and with respect to some of the teachings, practices of some of these religions. To start off, a very important place for us to begin in thinking about Christianity, its development, and especially its success, is to think about some of the political developments related to Greece and its conquest of its imperial conquest. Now, prior to the Greeks, of course, the Persians, the Medes, had been in control of large sections of the Middle East and into Eastern Europe, but in the 5th century BC, the Greeks started to throw off the Persian control. And gradually, as they worked against this, there was an attempt to try and unite the Greeks together and give it a Greek identity as opposed to these city-states like Athens, Sparta, and other things like that. So these changes were Greeks trying to unite with each other and especially get the Persian control away. And it's Philip of Macedon who eventually is able to pull the Greeks together to remove the control of the Persians, but he is assassinated before that is able to take place. And it's his son, Alexander, who ascends to the throne and is the one who is able to hold on to this Greek unity and push the Persians back. He's able to make it the whole way to the Indus River out near India before turning back and eventually dying of a fever. But this political spread, this political development, this imperial progress has some important effects that especially will make it useful for Christianity. And largely what we're thinking about here is what we might term Hellenism, this spread of Greek culture. And that occurred in a couple of ways. First, there was the spread of Greeks outside of Greece. Now, prior to, we're talking the 4th century BC here. Prior to this, there had been some Greek movement to places outside of Greece. But with the spread of the Greek Empire, there were more and more Greeks spreading throughout that region. And because of the control that was exerted by Greece in these various places, Greeks rose to prominence in these areas. Because there were more Greeks, because they became very prominent, Greek culture spread and developed in many of these places. So more and more people were shaped by Greek culture. So the Greeks are being unified, but now there's this kind of unification that's also taking place in these other regions in the ancient Near East. Another development coming as a consequence of this is this development of a economic unity. Alexander and then later successors minted silver coins. There was one currency for the entire empire. And so while regions might still have their own indigenous coins, there was a currency that extended across the region. There is an irony here, of course, is that Greece has caused a lot of the problems because we are a very tight economic world now, and so Greece here in some of their decisions economically are causing some financial problems elsewhere. A fourth consequence of this was the spread of the Greek language, specifically the Koine dialect. And so this made it where there was a common language that could be used for commerce, that could be used for trade, that could be used for communication across the empire. Of course, that would be very important as we think of Christianity in those early centuries, especially with the New Testament being written in Koine and something that could be read across the empire. Non-Greeks began to accept Greek ideas, and so this homogenizing force of Greek language, Greek philosophy. The spread of Greek culture also brought a higher level of education, higher levels of literacy, which again is, yes, kind of politically important, but especially I think in the context of Christianity, when how the documents become important, especially those after the years of the apostles, having those documents where you can read those documents. And as a community that might not have an apostle with you, you could understand the message of Jesus. The spread of Greek deities also came about due to Alexander and the consequences of his political efforts. Another important development kind of coming out of this is the importance of philosophy and philosophical dialogue related to particularly ethics. Greek religion and then later Roman religion, especially at this time, had little to say about ethics and morality. A lot of the focus was on practice, offering sacrifices to the gods. But when you looked at the behavior of the gods, they weren't any better than human beings. Often they engaged in immoral behavior. And so it was philosophy that provided a way to think about how, what is a right life, what is good and right action. And so this debate and this discussion was an important development, because these are some of the things that Christians will be getting into. The societal developments of where people are located became important as well. The city, much like it was in Greece, becomes a way for framing society. Centralization. For the Greeks, it evidenced civilization, but this meant that apostles, other Christians, were able to go to cities and encounter large numbers of people, as opposed to more agricultural society where you would have to go out to the farms and everybody would be so spread out. Finally, the increase of individualism, individual expression, very important component for Western thought in general, but in thinking about how Christianity emphasized the importance of the individual choice in following Jesus. After Alexander died, his empire was divided among 4 of his generals. There was an attempt for a while to try and keep it with Alexander's progeny, but that didn't work out, and so things split. Palestine, or Judea, was originally under the control of a dynasty of one of Alexander's generals in Egypt, but eventually switched to the control of a dynasty located in Syria. With this, Jews faced a great challenge. How does one respond to Greek culture? Because a lot of the elements of Greek culture, not just, obviously, Greek gods is quite different than the monotheistic view. But what do you do about the Greek culture? and thinking about some of the things related to the Greek culture. And this issue of what to do about how one should maintain one's Jewish identity in the face of Greek culture. This came to a head in the 2nd century BC, largely due to the activities of one of the rulers from Syria, named the dynasty named after Alexander's general Seleucus. So, Antiochus IV was the 8th Seleucid ruler, ruling from about 175 to 163. During his time, we are beginning to see the rise of Rome as an imperial power. It's a republic, but it's spreading. It's consolidating power, and has been doing so for a century or more. Ultimately, it ends up forcing the Seleucid Empire to pay tribute, which ends up causing the Seleucids some financial difficulty. So on the one side, you have this concern for Hellenism. Right? The Jews are, what do we do about wearing Greek clothing, using Greek for commerce, the government, etc. There were some that, felt that it was okay to wear Greek clothing. Others thought that it would be too much of a giving in to Greek culture. There were some, evidently, young Jews that were interested in exercising in the gymnasia of the Greek cities. But of course, to exercise in the gymnasia as a male, you would exercise naked, and circumcision would identify you as a Jew. And so there's reports of people trying to undergo procedures to uncircumcise themselves. I don't know how that would work, but this is what the ideas were. So on the one side, you have this kind of tension between those who are adopting Greek culture and those that are holding on to traditional Jewish culture. And then on the other side, you have these pressures developing politically. So Antiochus, right, he's in a difficult position economically. He has to pay all this tribute to Rome. He's also power hungry. He also has a rather high opinion of himself. The nickname he kind of gets is Epiphanes, which means God manifest. Right? So if you go around, your nickname is God manifest, you obviously have a high opinion of yourself. Well, he decides that what he needs to do is gain control of Egypt. And so he plunders the temple in Jerusalem for money to wage war against Egypt. So it goes to Egypt. Rome intervenes, and Antiochus loses. Rumors of his death start to spread into Palestine. And so the idea is that he's been killed in this. Well, there are some Jews in Jerusalem that think now would be a good time to revolt and throw off the power of the Seleucids and regain our freedom. Only Antiochus has not died, and so when he comes through and hears of this revolt, he is furious. He breaks down the walls of Jerusalem, deploys a garrison of soldiers there, and passes a variety of laws related to the Jewish religion, destroying the scriptures, outlawing festivals, including the Sabbath, prohibiting observance of food laws, prohibiting the practice of circumcision. Ultimately, at least according to some of the historical traditions of the time, builds an altar on top of the altar of burnt offering and sacrifices a pig on it, essentially desacralizing the altar, making it worthless. Well, not everyone decided to take this and accept it. A man named Matthias, who was a priest from the Hasmonean family, decides to take matters into his own hand. A Greek official comes to him and is attempting to make him to sacrifice to the gods, and Matthias refuses, rises up, and kills the official. His son Judas will later create a guerrilla revolt against the Syrians, waging war. The family will get the name Maccabees. It's uncertain what exactly the term Maccabee means. Some people suggested the hammer, right? And so the Judah Maccabeus, Judah the hammer. The group is successful. Around 164, Antiochus withdraws the ban against the Jewish religion. The altar, the temple are reconsecrated, and once again sacrifices are offered. It is that event, the reconsecration of the temple, that is remembered in the festival of Hanukkah, the Feast of Lights. This is to remember the taking back of the temple, making it holy once again. Antiochus died in 163. The Hasmoneans continued to push until 142, when they finally gained their independence from Syria. They would remain an independent state until the year 63 BC, when Rome would take over. It would be the last independent state for the Jews until 1948, when the modern state of Israel was created. After this period, the independent period, the Hasmoneans have a lot of influence. They are the priestly family. The Hasmoneans take over the high priesthood. Eventually, one of the Hasmoneans will name himself king. But civil war will break out, destabilizing the society, allowing the Romans to come in.